missing someone. Love with all your heart. Missing someone. Love with heart.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. In this week's episode, I'm going to transform my client and do some rainbow hair on her. This is her before. We usually will do a creative color every about 3 months, and I do highlight her roots and keep her ends on the solid side so that she feels like she has the most amount of color. This is typically how I like to retouch my creative color clients so that they can go a little bit longer in between appointments, opposed to if I were to do a full bleach out, they would have to come in every 4 to 6 weeks. But by doing it this way, a lot of my clients feel like they can come and wait 3 months in between appointments and enjoy their fade out. So I started in the back when I highlighted my client's roots. And as I go up the head, I like to take my sections back to back without leaving any space in between. This way they get as much color as possible. And then everything that I leave out from this weave, I will pick up next weave, and that is exactly how I keep the ends nice and solid. I feel like this also creates a nice lift because I'm taking very thin sections between my weaves, and also my weaves are more chunky on the bottom, so you'll see more thicker ribbons of the color. And when I retouch it, it's a lot easier for me to go back in and see. So you can see how chunky the dark pieces that I left out last time were. So it's very easy for me to just pick them right up and then highlight it again for this appointment. This also keeps the hair nice and healthy, but I'm able to get my clients' roots really light with this technique. Another reason why this technique would be beneficial for my client is because when her roots grow in, it's a lot softer grout than just having a solid root where you'll see like the really harsh line of demarcation when the roots grow in, especially when you're highlighting or lightening your client's hair super light when they are naturally super dark. I feel like any type of highlights like this definitely blends it a lot better, and they're able to go a little bit longer in between appointments, which a lot of my clients do like and appreciate. Also, whenever you're highlighting any type of hair, especially dark hair and dark coarse hair, it's really important to like fully saturate so that you get an even lift. If you miss any spots or undersaturate, you'll definitely see some warm spots. So it's very important to fully saturate or even oversaturate where the roots are, just so that you make sure that you get as even as a lift as possible. But it's also super important to try and not overlap onto the previously lightened hair. That's why I feel like doing this highlighting pattern, the lines are very consistent, so it's really easy for me to see where the lightener needs to stop. If I were to do more of a blended highlight, or let's say a random weave, it would be really hard for me to pick up the dark pieces without picking up some light pieces and accidentally like overlapping on some of the ends. So keeping these weaves very thick and chunky on the underneath here, I'm able to visually see exactly where it needs to be lightened so that it prevents any further breakage or any breakage at all in the future. And so I continued this highlighting pattern all the way up to the occipital crown area of her head, where she starts to part her hair, and you can see most of the hair that overlays everything. So to keep that part a little bit more blended on the top, since we're not going to be shadow rooting or anything like that, we're just going to be putting like a creative color semitone from the Pulp Riot line. I do just make these weaves a little bit smaller as I get towards the top so that they're able to blend in with her natural roots. And then for my lightener formulation, in the very first bowl that I ever use whenever I highlight my clients, I like to make that first bowl a very weak bowl, because that part is where you start highlighting, so that stays on the hair the longest, and I never want to rinse before I'm fully done highlighting the whole head, so I do make that formula a little bit weaker. So in the back, for the very first few foils, that is lightener with 20 volume and 6 volume, and then for the rest of the head, I generally just like to use 20 all over. So as I move towards the front here, I do the sides first, and then the money piece, and then continue up the sides above the occipital and crown area. And when I do the sides, I will do the left side or right side first, and then move on to the other side before moving on to the money piece, so that there is balance and they're able to lift at the same rate. Because if I were to do one side and then the money piece and then the other side, then one side would lift a little bit lighter than the other. So just to keep a nice balance between both sides and have them lift pretty evenly, I like to highlight one side and then move on directly to the other side before finishing the top. And so when I rinse everything out, I do rinse everything in quadrants to how I highlighted. So the back, I rinse that out first, and then I will rinse the sides out together as well. It just makes it a lot easier for me to keep track and make sure that everything lifts pretty evenly throughout the whole head. And since we're going for more of a solid effect, for her money piece, I did about 3 slices and then about 2 to 3 baby lights afterwards before moving on to the side. Also, another helpful tip when you're highlighting the very last section on the top, I usually will start to wherever they part their hair. In this instance, she does part her hair on the left side, so that is why I'm starting to highlight the top part on the left side. And this is because I want wherever she parts her hair to get the best lift if possible. And so if she were to part her hair in the middle, I would just start on whichever side and then continue my highlights past her middle part, so that it ensures that wherever she parts her hair, since it's the middle, gets a really good lift as well. So since we're doing a creative color tone, whenever my client wants a cool based tone, I try to lift them as light as possible, just so that the fade is really pretty. Because if I were to lift them any warmer, sometimes the fade gets a little funky, or any type of like color that might have blue in it could fade really green. So I always try to lift my clients to at least like a level 9 and 10. And again, that's just so that their color can last them really long and fade really pretty as they wash it. And for future too, it makes it a lot easier for me to do different colors on their hair if they're wanting to change it up. This client particularly, we always do a different creative color tone, and because of that, I like to lift her pretty light so that we're able to do all these different tones. But mind you, since we do a lot of different tones on her each time she comes in, I always try to work with what my clients have if we can. Sometimes I'll use blank canvas if they're really wanting a color that's opposite from the color wheel from what they have going on. But for the most part, I try my best to convince them to do something that works with how their color faded out. So here is my client's hair right after I had blow dried and processed all of her highlights. You can see her highlights are nice and chunky there, so that she has nice ribbons of color. But of course, she doesn't see these chunks of color because they're mostly hidden underneath from wherever she would ever part her hair. But that is pretty much how it looks right after the highlights. I mixed up some rainbow tones for her because we're going to be doing a hidden rainbow underneath the occipital, and above the rainbow we're going to be doing like a periwinkle purpley tone to kind of blend and just have over the rainbow. This is actually my client's first time ever doing rainbow, and so she wanted just like a hidden rainbow on the underneath, but I assured her that after this appointment I'm sure she's gonna love the fade of rainbow and always ask for it after this, because I feel like whenever you get rainbow hair and start to see how it fades really pretty and pastel, everyone is always super hooked after. So the way that I applied her rainbow tones is very similar to the bubble technique. If you're unfamiliar with the bubble technique, it's basically taking very thin sections and laying the new hair right on top of the previously colored hair from the previous section and just painting right on top of it. This creates a nice blend, and as I'm applying the rainbow tones, you can see I'm overlapping when one color meets the other. So for instance, this top part is purple and right below it is the hot pink, and I'm basically painting the purple into that pink section, and I alternate as I go through each slice that I bring down. So the next section, since this one I overlapped purple onto the pink, the next one I'm going to overlap the pink onto the purple, and that is how I was able to create such a beautiful seamless rainbow blend. And so I just repeat this pattern all the way up, and my sections, I don't take anything wider than my foil so that I'm able to fit it on my foil basically. And so after that I will continue up the same pattern up the sides, trying to match exactly where the colors are in the back so that they kind of come together and blend together. And then after I was done doing the rainbow panels on the underneath, I just painted the whole top halo above the occipital the same tone of purple. So once all the colors were done processing for about 25 minutes, I took her back to the bowl and I started to just rinse the rainbow first. I opted to rinse the rainbow first because we did use very vibrant colors, and I did notice that using the Pulp-Rite semis, for my yellow I used some Satire pretty much straight, and I feel like the Satire does bleed a lot, surprisingly, out of all the colors that I used. I feel like the yellow bled the most onto the blue that was on the ends and made it more teal. So I guess next time if I were to use Satire, I would definitely hold out the ends if it were to bleed on anything. But other than that, I feel like for the most part Pulp-Rite has a really good factor that it doesn't bleed onto each other when you use a lot of their vibrant colors, which I really love. But once this was all done, I gave her a really good rinse with ice cold water, and then I did do a full keratin treatment on her to help with her frizz, because if she were to just dry her hair naturally without the keratin, it does get very poofy. So this is my client's after. This is right after the keratin. If you don't know what a keratin treatment is, it just takes away the frizz and makes it a lot more manageable if you have curly or frizzy hair. And so she left very straight because she can't be washing her hair for the next 72 hours because of the treatment. But you can see how well blended the rainbow is. She does have some short layers in there from a previous haircut, so it does give it a nice blend too, because you can definitely see the rainbow where that short layer kind of ends. But it really worked out because it looked like it blended the rainbow even more having these shorter layers on the top. But you can see how nice and blended doing that technique is with the rainbow, even though the rainbow tones are very vibrant, and the purple on top gives a really good complement. Even though it's nice and light and ashy, I feel like everything will fade really pretty, and since the vibrancy is mostly on the underneath, I have a feeling this rainbow might last her a while. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in to this week's video, and I will talk to you guys next week.